We're talking about early Buffalo Bills draft narratives that I'm not behind and a few that I like today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're on YouTube, your first watch every day. And as a reminder, Locked On Bills is free and available on all platforms. Today on the podcast, we're going to have a discussion that I've kind of been looking forward to. We're going to talk some draft, and we're going to talk specifically about some early Buffalo Bills draft narratives that, quite honestly, I'm not behind. And we'll also talk about a couple that I am behind, but there are four major things that I'm seeing so far when it comes to discussion around the Buffalo Bills and the draft and some directions that they should go. And I am going to provide my argument against some of those. And then, like I said, I got some stuff I do like that I'm going to share with you here today on the podcast. The first thing that I will say, though, before we dive into these specific things, and I say this every single year, do not marry yourself to specific outcomes when it comes to the NFL draft. There is so many different things that can happen. There's always surprises in the draft. So with the Bills picking at 25, I implore you to not go into the draft thinking the Bills have to get this one specific player, because you're going to wind up disappointed. So keep an open mind. I'll keep an open mind as well. I know that I have a lot of strong opinions on the draft, but I am very open-minded, and I like the range of opinions that exist out there. That's how we learn from each other. So while I'm going to offer some strong opinions today, if you have interesting things to say in response to them, I'm open to learning your perspective and taking it into consideration. So let's start with the first draft narrative that I don't like, and it's the one that I've teased now for, it feels like, at least a week, and it's that I'm not for Jordan Davis in the first round for the Buffalo Bills. So who is Jordan Davis? Jordan Davis is a 6'6", 350-pound defensive tackle from Georgia. He's a monster of a man. He's a dominant run defender. And for a guy that's 6'6", 350, he has some crazy impressive moments of athleticism for a man of his size. In 2021, he was a consensus All-American. He won the Chuck Bednarik Award for the best defensive player in college football, and he won the Outland Trophy, which is awarded to the best interior lineman. So you're probably thinking to yourself, Joe, what's not to like? 6'6", 350, great resume, massive. You said he's got some impressive moments of athleticism. What's not to like? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about. Jordan Davis isn't a first-round target for me. First of all, I think he's a limited player in a number of ways. Most importantly, I don't feel he brings enough value on passing downs. And we know that the NFL is about passing the football and stopping the pass. And so for players that I view as first-round options, you better bring value on passing downs. And I don't see enough of that out of Jordan Davis. First-round defensive linemen need to be able to rush the quarterback, and Jordan Davis is a below-average pass rusher, in my opinion. 2020 was widely considered his best season in college as a pass rusher. So let's talk about his impact as a pass rusher in college, specifically in 2021. Among 180 FBS interior defensive linemen. FBS means Football Bowl Subdivision. So major college football. Among 180 of them interior defensive linemen that had at least 220 pass rush snaps, which is the same amount that Jordan Davis had, right? So we're not talking about guys that had less opportunity. These are players that had at least 220 pass rush snaps. Jordan Davis ranked 108th in pass rush win percentage at 8.3, 92nd in pass rush productivity, which is a formula courtesy of Pro Football Focus that combines sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times a player rushed the passer. Was 126th in total pressures with 14 pressures on 220 pass rush snaps, and he had 2 sacks. When it comes to PFF pass rush grade, he ranked 81st. So metrically, he is very below average when it comes to rushing the passer. Now, when I watch his tape and I focus on the traits, which is what I do when I evaluate prospects, I also see a below average pass rusher. His value on passing downs is pushing the pocket, but I don't think he has the first step quickness necessary to make his ability to collapse the pocket matter. Quarterbacks don't care if you slowly walk back the center. Pressure in the face of the quarterback has to be quick for it to matter, and I don't see that out of Jordan Davis. So first of all, I don't see the pass rush ability for Jordan Davis to be a first-round value in my view. And the second major concern, and maybe this is the most important major concern that I have with Jordan Davis, is his weight management issues. His weight has fluctuated between 340 and 360 over the last couple of years at Georgia, and he arrived to campus at 380 pounds as a freshman. I mean, you can look at this player, you can see him on tape, you can see pictures of him and understand that there's no reason for him to be this massive. He has a lot of bad weight. And he's on a record as stating that he has a sweet tooth and that he doesn't like vegetables. So let me move on to some quotes here that I think are very, very notable that give us some insight into Jordan Davis, his weight management issues, his conditioning issues, and his pass rush ability or lack thereof. This is a quote from Georgia head coach Kirby Smart during 2021 spring football practices, commenting on Jordan Davis, who returned to Georgia in 2021 with high ambitions and specifically said he wanted to come back and win a national championship. Now, they did that, so congratulations. But let's talk about it. This is what Kirby Smart said about Jordan Davis during 2021 spring practices. Quote, Jordan's biggest issue is conditioning and weight control. He knows that, and we've got to get him to cut some more for him to be elite. The game of football is played so differently now, and there's a certain games where he's a larger factor in, and there's some where we try to make him a non-factor when they're spreading the ball out, throwing the ball a lot, and playing loose plays. It's harder for him to be a contributor when the ball game speeds up. So it's critical that he gets in the best shape of his life. Part of the reason he decided to come back was to get in great shape so he could create some more value, and that's what he's going to work on. Pretty concerning stuff, right? The game of football is played so differently now, and there are certain games where he's a larger factor, and there's some where we try to make him a non-factor. There's some that we try to make him a non-factor when spreading the ball out, throwing the ball, and playing loose plays. That's massively concerning. Spring of 2021. Jordan Davis himself, this October. People say, why doesn't JD play third down? Davis said, my job isn't to play third down. My job is to get to third down. Did that make you pause? This isn't even a player that's focused on rushing the passer. He wants to get the offense in long and late down so he can come off the field. He knows he has an awareness to his skill set. The team has an awareness to his skill set. So this is a player that He literally said he's not focused on third down. His job is to get the third down. My job isn't to play third down. So even if you think he can grow as a pass rusher, we're talking about a guy that really hasn't emphasized that in his training and development to this point. Let's look at another quote from Jordan Davis himself. This was before the national championship game this year when reflecting on the SEC championship game loss to Alabama. This is what he said. And remember, he came back to school to win a national championship and focus on his weight control and conditioning. Jordan Davis said, and they lost that game to Alabama. He said, I had to look at myself and realize I wasn't doing enough. I'd say we weren't as conditioned as we should have been, especially on my part. SEC championship game against Alabama. Was not conditioned as well as I should have been. After your entire purpose for coming back to school was to show that you can control your weight and manage your conditioning so that way you can be a more impactful football player. Those quotes concern me a ton. He has a long-standing weight management issue and a conditioning issue, and those things continue to show up in the most meaningful moments of his college career that were literally 2 months ago. Jordan Davis averaged 25 snaps per game this year, down from about 33 last year. When you look at the Alabama game that he's talking about, where he straight up said that I wasn't in good enough shape to play in that game, Alabama went tempo to keep Jordan Davis on the field, and he was completely gassed, just standing around while plays were happening. Alabama said, Jordan Davis is on the field, we're running tempo, and we know he can't keep up. That's too easy of a way to minimize a player. So I have concerns about the pass rush. I have concerns about the weight management. I have concerns about the conditioning. And for good reason, as I've already described. Now, it's widely understood that Jordan Davis brings a lot on running downs. He's a big, strong dude that has a good sense for processing the run game. Being big and strong matters, but everyone in the NFL is big and strong. Where I get concerned even about Jordan Davis as a run defender in the NFL is his pad level and lack of bend, and how that's going to translate to being stout at the next level against the run. I mean, he plays tall, and you see that show up on his tape. You're going to have to play with leverage in the NFL, and I'm not sure that he has a lot of natural bend to do that. He's a player that plays tall. He's 6'6". So I do have some concern about his run defense. So if you're going to be this world-class run stopper that's just going to clog lanes, own your space, keep the second level clean, and that's going to be your calling card, I have some concerns there as well. Now, they're to a much lesser degree, but there's concerns. So predictively, there's another element here. It's the predictive side of things. I'd honestly be very surprised if Jordan Davis was on the Bills' radar. Let me say this, because just like you, I want the Bills to be more stout up the middle. I want them to have a better run defense. But a player like Jordan Davis just doesn't seem to fit what we've seen Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott go after. I think there's some Bills fans out there that have romanticized about how Davis's presence would help Tremaine Edmonds and help Ed Oliver. And I think there's some truth to that, but why should we think that the Bills would even be interested in Jordan Davis? What behaviors can we point to from them, meaning Beane and McDermott, that would suggest they would want a player like Jordan Davis so much so that they would use a first-round draft pick on him? So not only am I not fully bought in on Jordan Davis, but I don't think the Bills are or will be. And I will also say that I honestly might think Travis Jones from UConn is a better prospect. So if you're looking for a one technique that has limited pass rushing ability, I'm not even fully convinced that Jordan Davis is the best one in this draft. That opportunity cost will always concern me a ton regarding a player like Jordan Davis in the first round. There are always going to be options on day 2 or day 3 that I'm always going to like better as a one-tech, run-stopping defensive tackle. And for this draft, specifically, I already mentioned that I like Travis Jones. I like John Ridgway from Arkansas. I like Noah Ellis from Idaho. I like Marquand McCall from Kentucky. I'd rather have one of those plus something different in the first round. Let me say one more thing, because I see the name Vita Vea invoked from a lot of people when discussing Jordan Davis. I can't get there. I cannot get there at all. Vita Vea is an absolute freak. 6'4", 347. He runs a 5'1", 40-yard dash. Did 41 bench press reps. And Jordan Davis might test really, really well. But compare their tape, and I don't see similar players. I had a first-round grade on Vea. So that should tell you something right there, because you know that I discriminate against skill sets like Jordan Davis in the first round, but Vita Vea was an easy first-round grade for me because I don't see them similarly. I see a much more dynamic football player that can help you on passing downs out of Vita Vea. I want to give you a couple of excerpts from my scouting report on Vea back in 2018. I wrote down that he's a maximum effort player and unrelenting in pursuit. He never takes plays off, has developed a variety of counters to continue to work off blocks, and will chase down plays from distance. Now, keep in mind, Vita Vea, his last year at Washington, played 43 snaps per game. 25 for Jordan Davis. I also said this about Vita Vea in my summary of my scouting report on him. Vea's rare blend of size, power, and movement skills make him a dominating force. His mass and strength are often overwhelming for blockers. A versatile talent, Vea can play any position in a 3-4 alignment or inside in even fronts. Given his physical traits and functional strength, Vea should see a significant portion of the reps in year one. The main concern with Vea is that he often resolves to relying on his power at the expense of sound technique. With continued development, Vea has a chance to become one of the premier defensive linemen in the NFL. Vea is a high floor and high ceiling prospect. I don't see Vita Vea and Jordan Davis the same at all. My notes on Jordan Davis don't look anything like that. So I fully understand that Jordan Davis has a lot of fans within Bills Mafia, but I can't get myself to be one of them. And regardless of where you stand on this discussion, I hope you can at least understand where I'm coming from on this. And so here's what I will do at some point in the coming weeks. And it's just like what I did with Travis Etienne last year and all that discussion. I'll come up with a list of, if all of these players are off the board, I would support the Bills drafting Jordan Davis and see where he lands. So after I do that, I might have a different opinion about the valuation, but I doubt it, to be completely honest with you. So again, I know Jordan Davis has his supporters, and I'm not looking for an argument or a fight on this or anything like that, but I wanted to share with everyone my thoughts on the matter. I feel like I've done a lot of research. I've watched a lot of tape, and I feel like I have a very different opinion on this than a lot of people. And look, I might be wrong. If you hadn't missed, then you hadn't scouted. If the Bills wind up drafting Jordan Davis, I'm not going to sit here and root against him. I hope that he comes in and dominates. I hope he's a better player than Vita Vea. So I'm not married to my takes being correct at the expense of something good happening for the Bills. Don't get me wrong. But as I process this information and formulate my take on Jordan Davis and the Bills in the first round, I can't get there. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC, and they've even got Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. I talked way longer than I anticipated on that Jordan Davis thing. Wow. I do have some other things I want to say here. I don't feel nearly as passionately about any of these other things as I do the Jordan Davis stuff, but there's some stuff that I'm seeing out there that I want to address and share some thoughts on. The next one is, we'll call it the Tyler Linderbaum segment. Now, hear me through on this because Tyler Linderbaum is a player that I really love. I think he's a great prospect. I'm a big fan. I think he's the best center in the draft. So Tyler Linderbaum, center from Iowa, really, really good football player. And there's a lot for the Bills to like. I mean, he's a corn-fed Iowa boy with a wrestling background. I mean, if that doesn't scream Sean McDermott, I don't know what does. But here's where I get a little concerned about Tyler Linderbaum. I think he's a scheme-specific player. And we need to know how he measures and how he tests. Because I fear he's 6'2", 290. And that's a very, very small center. And we also need to learn more about the Bills' intentions with two things. First of all, with Mitch Morse. Is he really going to be cut? Because that's a possibility. I don't think he should. I don't think that's even a conversation worth having, but because there is an opportunity with his contract, we have to be mindful of that. I mean, Mitch Morse could be an extension candidate. So how do the Bills view Mitch Morse? And the reason I bring that up is because obviously Morse is a great center, and I don't think Tyler Linderbaum has positional flexibility. I don't think you look at Tyler Linderbaum and think this guy can play guard. So I think he's a center only. And he's also a scheme-specific guy. And so because of that, we need to know more about what run scheme we're going to see under Ken Dorsey. Because if it's a zone run scheme, then obviously Linderbaum becomes a fit. But if it's going to be more multiple with a good amount of gap runs, then I would question about Linderbaum being a good fit. If he's 290, he's awfully light for a center. And I talk to a lot of NFL people, and they always say this. This comes up all the time. They say, big people beat up little people. And I found this quote from Lance Zierlein's scouting report on Tyler Linderbaum. It's from a pro personnel director for an NFC team. This is what he said about Tyler Linderbaum. Really fun tape. He's going to be really hard to beat to the spot, but he's just a small man by our standards, and that worries me. I'm also not fully convinced that the Bills should be thinking about offensive line in the first round. I mean, if I'm Brandon Beane, I'm probably going to bring back Ryan Bates. I'm going to lean on Aaron Kromer, the new offensive line coach, who I'm sure will have some players that he wants to bring in. And if the Bills' offensive line room next year was starters Dawkins, Bates, Morse, Williams, and Brown, with some combination of Bacher, Feliciano, Doyle, Cody Ford, and some Kromer guys as the backups, I think I'm okay with that. Now, we do need to see what the Bills will do with some of these contracts, because within Darrell Williams and Mitch Morse and John Feliciano and even some of the expiring contracts in Ryan Bates and Ike Bacher, there's some questions there. But there's a good chance that we get through free agency and coming up on the draft, and the offensive line might be pretty well set. And the Bills will be more in the market for developmental guys than having to pick a guy early in the draft that's a starter. So Linderbaum's tempting because of the player, and I love the player, and for certain teams, I think he'd be a great pick in the first round. But at this point, I worry about the fit and the need for me to really lock in on Tyler Linderbaum as a first-round option for the Bills. The next one is cornerback. And I'll say this. I am not fully against a corner in the first round. Not at all. I'm fair, but I will say that I'm fairly lukewarm on it. I mean, I love Sauce Gardner. I love Derek Stingley. I love Andrew Booth. One of those three guys to get to 25, that'd be the easy pick for me. I pick them all day long. But I side more with the value on day 2, early day 3 at corner. Sean McDermott, he's got an off-the-charts resume when it comes to getting production out of defensive backs in general that aren't premium picks. Levi Wallace, an undrafted free agent. Dane Jackson, a 7th-round pick. Jordan Poyer was a 7th-round pick that was on like multiple teams before he came to Buffalo and became an All-Pro. Micah Hyde was a 5th-round pick that the Green Bay Packers didn't offer an extension to. Taron Johnson, a 4th-round pick. In Carolina, James Bradbury, a 2nd-round pick, number 62 overall. Josh Norman was a 5th-round pick. Kirk Coleman, Mike Mitchell. I mean, McDermott's resume getting value out of defensive backs that aren't premium picks is off the charts. And so, yeah, there's that big part of me that would love to see the premium investment, a more athletic guy, all that stuff. I'm fully in. But as I consider how the Bills can maximize this 1st-round pick, I'm not fully convinced it's going to be a corner. So I told you about the 3 that I love. I have some level of interest in the Washington corners, either Trent McDuffie or Kyler Gordon. We'll talk more about them at some point. But the name that I see a lot in mock drafts that are sent to me is Roger McCreary out of Auburn. And I love Roger McCreary. I had him on the Draft Dudes podcast a couple weeks ago. He's a really likable guy, and he's got really good tape. But, I mean, he's 5'11", 189 with 29.25-inch arms. Sub 30-inch arms. I mean, he's barely got 29-inch arms. Wingspan of 7 5/8. So unless you are convinced that the Bills will run a lot more press man coverage or just off man coverage, I'm not sure that McCreary is a 1st-round target for the Bills. So the main thing I wanted you to take away from that was I'm lukewarm on corner. McDermott has an amazing resume of getting value out of corners. And if you think Roger McCreary is a 1st-round target for the Bills, I have my doubts that he actually is. Although I love Roger McCreary as a player, but fit is something we have to talk more. You have to be mindful of fit when you're talking prospects going to teams. It has to make sense from a stylistic perspective and what that team likes to do. And I don't see those 2 things marrying up with Roger McCreary and the Bills. So it's not that I don't like Roger McCreary. I just don't know that I love him for the Bills unless you can tell me right now that, okay, the plan is we want to run more man coverage and we feel like Roger McCreary is a skill set we need to introduce to be able to do that. The next one is a lot like corner in that I'm not opposed to it. I just don't feel the same urgency that a lot of other fans do. And that's wide receiver. There's some people out there that feel like the Bills have to pick a wide receiver in the 1st round, that they have to be able to maximize Josh Allen's production and give him wide receivers like crazy, which is something I talked a lot about last year, right? You guys know that I love wide receivers for Josh Allen. Like, I'm not against a receiver in the 1st round, but the point that I want to get across here is that I just don't have anywhere near the sense of urgency that I feel from some fans. And really, the reason for that is the NFL has proven over the last 5 years, 6 years, to find consistent value on day 2 and beyond when it comes to wide receivers. There's been a lot of 1st-round flops at receiver. Now, I know that there's Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, but there's also Jalen Reagor and N'Keal Harry and Laquan Treadwell and Josh Doxson. There's been a lot of whiffs in the 1st round at receiver. Let me give you some of these players over the last 5 drafts, not including 2021. Day 2 and early day 3 receivers that have come in and been incredibly productive. In 2020, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Chase Claypool, Gabriel Davis, Darnell Mooney. 2019, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, D.K. Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Hunter Renfrow. 2018, Christian Kirk, Michael Gallup, DJ Chark. 2017, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin. 2016, Michael Thomas, Tyler Boyd. It's a really good resume. So I think the Bills can find good value on wide receiver beyond the 1st round, although there are some guys I would love in the 1st round. The point that I want to get across here is that I just don't have that same urgency, and I have some level of belief that the Bills could do what a lot of those other teams have done and find an answer at wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 after the 1st round and be able to get yourself something else in the 1st round plus that receiving option a little bit later. And the Bills have done that with Gabriel Davis, a 4th round pick, who a lot of people think could be the number 2. this year. So the point with wide receiver, I'm on board, but I don't have that same urgency. I'm not going into this thing thinking, oh my God, the Bills have to get a receiver in the first round. And I see that from some people. So let's close on what I do like. There's two things that I really do like that really get me excited right now when we talk about the draft and the Bills, first round specifically. The first one is defensive linemen that can affect the cornerback. Defensive linemen that can affect the quarterback. Devontae Wyatt from Georgia. A lot of good edge rushers if one of the top 6 get to 25. That's what I'm interested in. And I think there's going to be options at 25 for the Bills. The other one is the right wide receiver. Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Jamison Williams from Alabama. And that list might expand. There might be some more receivers that I really love for the Bills at 25. But when I consider the talent in this draft and how the Bills can maximize value and impact from what they do with pick 25, that's what I feel the best about right now. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like corners or there's other positions in play that I couldn't get behind, because there are. But that's what really moves the needle for me right now. And obviously, the coming weeks with free agency will change a lot of this. But as we have this conversation today, that's where I'm at. Like I said, the list will grow. I'll do a Bills-specific draft board at some point. We'll do 25 at 25, where I give you 25 names that I'd like to see the Bills pick at 25, and you peel them off one by one, and the one that's highest on the board remaining at 25 is the player I would want them to pick. But as we really start digging into the draft discussion, I wanted to go on record with some of my preliminary thoughts and especially some things that I'm not on board with. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you have an open mind regarding some of the pretty strong opinions that I had here today on the podcast, and hopefully we can learn from each other. That's what this is all about. The differences of opinions should be fun. So don't make them not fun by not being able to interpret everything correctly and understand that I'm willing to learn from you. If you have information that you want to share with me that can maybe move me off of one of these opinions, I'm okay with that. I presented my opinions respectfully. I'd like to hear yours respectfully as well. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, we are going to work through Brandon Beane's off-season checklist. I have created his to-do list for him, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you tomorrow on the podcast. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.